Hello and welcome to Sunday conversation about spirituality. My name is Philipp Kobald, and we're reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And I'm happy to have here today with me from Australia, Mark Nara. Hello, Mark.
Hey Philip, how are you, mate?
Wonderful, wonderful. Great. I think a little bit destroyed my intro, but never mind. That's part of life. Wonderful. Um, I'm really looking forward for this conversation. I'm saying it every time, and I mean it every time, because every guest brings something uniquely different. But you definitely gonna bring us a whole new world that most of us have never heard of, didn't know it exists, and therefore I'm so thankful having you as a guest because I really like to learn something new. I like to hear something new that I've probably never heard before. And from this perspective, this is going to be a really crazy podcast. But let us start first at the beginning with a small introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, okay, cool. No worries. So, yeah, I tattoo people. That's kind of like I guess the role that I'm playing. So most people would see me as a tattooist, and that kind of is the entry point into the space that I currently work with people. So, we're talking about tattoos, but like your podcast is focused on, we're looking at layers that are kind of beyond the surface of that. So we're looking at the impact of a tattoo on someone's mind and their spirit, um, not just the physical result on their body. So that's kind of the field that I'm working in, and it took a long time to land in this place. So initially, when I started becoming interested in tattoos, I think like most people, it was from a visual point of view. I was always artistic, so interested in you know, painting and sculpting and drawing. And through high school, I started doing some spray painting and graffiti and things like that because I wasn't into the paint by numbers or the typical artistic expressions. Went to university and eventually I started a tattoo apprenticeship because I thought that might be a good place for me to be creative, to have this like artistic experience. And initially it was, and there was like a long path of learning those technical attributes of how to mark someone's skin because it's very involved when you tattoo someone's skin. It's like the hardest medium that you can work with, right? Because it feels, it thinks, it bleeds, it has an opinion. Imagine a canvas, you paint something on it and goes like, "What the hell are you doing, man? I don't know if I want this painting on my canvas anymore, or I don't think you quite understood what the request was, or so it was a tricky thing, even from like a psychological point of view, to learn how to do something creative with somebody else. And that was before I even sort of like really became aware of what was happening to someone as a result of that interaction, you know? And so I think, a lot of artists, there is that sort of dealing with people skill set that they have to have. But same as like a lot of different jobs, like getting a haircut or whatever. And it wasn't till I was already heavily tattooed, I had a lot of skin in the game, um, that I started to realize what was actually taking place. And I think that also is maybe a common story. A lot of people are already quite heavily invested in their tattoo process. They've got one tattoo. They're like, okay, yep, it's time to get a tattoo. They're at this threshold. Do I get one? Don't I get one? They get one. And then after that first one, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I feel like maybe I might get another one. It's like, okay, they get another one. People say they're addictive. There's all these different sort of like niche that people fall into with like collecting different styles or existing with different subcultures. So there's lots of different streams that the tattooing process can take people down. And for myself, definitely. And I think for a lot of people I've worked with and what I see as a common story is people are pretty deep in the river of getting tattooed before they realize that they don't really know where they're going with it. So it's like they've started building a house, let's say, and they're about 3 or 4 rooms in before they even realize that there's a bigger structure that they're working with. Or maybe what they're building is starting to impact the environment that they're building it in, or they're building something and they didn't even consider the environmental layers to what they're building. So, how the outside world influences them as a result of what their tattoos are. And so, this was me. This was me, tattooing people, heavily tattooed, and then going through a process of becoming more aware of what was happening initially for myself in my life. So it wasn't
Right.
directly an awareness around tattoos initially. There was more what I guess
But
people would call
before,
like a waking up.
so before we go to the waking up, we'll must little
Yeah.
bit put the intention to the viewers who are waiting for the good stuff. So let them little bit first talk about something that we need to talk before, because
Mm.
tattooing, I'm not an expert whatsoever. I just did a bit of Googling as a preparation, but I
Yeah.
am a bit of an expert when it comes to symbolism and symbols. Not that, whatever, I do know some stuff about symbols. And
Okay.
so that's before we go into the stuff that we actually want to talk about. Let's a little bit stretch the time and talk about the meaning that so many people, I guess, are not aware that historically, as you said, tattooing exists in every culture around the globe, and that tattoos at some cultures had a lot of very strong meaning. The symbols, I know with the Maori, everybody knows that, but also with some medicine man had certain, there were protective tattoos against the devil, very popular at some point, some pentagrams and things. So before we go where we will go, can you maybe say a couple of words about different cultures and what tattoos meant there, or give us a short, like a short best of the history of tattoos, and especially with symbolism, with protective charms and things like that that people maybe don't know that that was a very strong part of warriors and things like that in the world of tattooing.
Yeah, yeah. So a little bit of a history recap of how tattoos have been used in the
Small one.
past by different cultures, for sure. Um, and I mean, as I'm doing this, I'll try and paint a broad picture of it. But feel free from your knowledge set with symbolism to dig into it a bit more and see if there's some pieces you think your listeners will find interesting or you'll find interesting. But I guess we got to start with the fact that tattooing now exists in a world that's like very secular, and a lot of people are sort of in this naturalist place where they don't think anything means anything. They think the world's kind of this big floating rock in space that's random. It's a random event. We've evolved from monkeys and we're on a rock and there's no meaning to our life. It's just, like a lucky dip that we're here, which is fine. People can think that if they want. But if we want to trace where tattooing existed in older cultures, we've got to understand that their worldview or their experience of themselves and their life at the time was what we call supernatural. So they had a highly supernatural existence. Nobody really was questioning whether there was meaning or where they belonged or what their cosmological view was. Depending on where they were on the planet and who their people were, they had really well formed uh, ways of seeing the world and existing that had to do with things beyond them. So they had their mythologies and their creation stories and their gods and their pantheons of gods or their single god or their nature spirits that they connected to or their story of their ancestors or whatever it is. They all have different stories. And then the role of tattooing exists within each culture as like an integral thread that helps weave all of these people together. So it's like it's quite literally doing it in terms of they're all wearing and sharing this this understanding of who they are as a people and what their story is. So a lot of the symbolism usually relates to uh, whoever is, I guess, holding the story for those people, and it's usually held collectively, deciding which things are relevant to the person that's going to be getting tattooed within that culture. So, like you said, it might be like it might be warriors. No, there's a very different place for um, war, battle, death, generally in a lot of these cultures. Again, understanding these kind of like supernatural elements. So there might be, for example, last night I was reading about some of the Filipino stuff. So like head hunting was an extremely um, correlated event to tattooing. So it's like if you wanted to receive tattoos within, certain areas, it's like the men were required to go on these sort of raids, and you got to understand again the time that they're living in. It's like it's very different. They're living in a world that's literally being invaded. There's like this conquest happening from these like alien people that misunderstand them and that are killing them as well. So it's like there's a very different framework that people are functioning from. But again, I think the role that the person giving the tattoos had in these cultures was one that was, again, kind of like lacking these days. So it's, you had a mix of the wise person, potentially the medicine person that was doing like healing, which again had a supernatural layer. It wasn't just like, you know, bio-Western medical. So there was a lot of spells and charms and things incorporated. Um, and then you might also have the priest or the holy person, So you got like these three
Yes.
things that again in our Western culture get separated. That it's highly likely there was like one person doing, um, whether it was like the men or the women, or there was like very different systems in place. The tattoo was like happening in a very specific way, so the tattoos would be very specific, um, and they become like
Yes.
I guess, like a language. There's like this element of language that exists within the tattoo so that you can signal something to yourself, to the people around you, uh, and to something beyond you. That's like one of the biggest relationships there. So it's like the actual tattoo itself becomes a device of communication and connection to something beyond you, which is what, spells, like you're
Right.
saying, or charms are about. It's beyond the physical.
So as far as I understand, the main groups historically were either, as we said, warriors for all kind of different reasons, as part of initiation, as part of success or rituals. Then, of course, the medicine men to show the status or position, or some kings and princes. It was a way to mark yourself that you have a certain position in the society. And then, of course, all the charms or the supernatural to protect yourself, to heal yourself. So this is like historically the three interesting groups that then very nicely link to what you have discovered or rediscovered or focused on with your work. So when we historically see that, as you said, in a world where the supernatural coexisted, or leadingly existed, that's maybe the interesting one. In some parts of our time, the supernatural was all guiding. In some parts of our time, there was some kind of coexistence. Right now, it's totally out of the picture. So that's an interesting one that I've the last
Mm-mm.
couple of days very strongly felt. It's almost crazy to talk to people who are completely into the supernatural, and you wonder the whole time, did they lose their mind, or we just went so much down the rabbit hole that we can't see some very simple truths and simple realities which just gone with the wind. So I think from that perspective, I'm looking forward for what comes next in this conversation, because you have such a gentle way of bringing some supernatural back into the story without being attacking anyone or anything. And so this is now a great way forward. So
Yeah,
let us
yeah.
first say, do you have any opinion on like medical charms or supernatural charms painted on the body as tattoos. Have you ever looked in those areas, or this is not so much part of your journey? I would be personally interested if you have looked into that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like for sure I have. And when it comes to medical, it's like, and charms. So charms are like, it's like there's an incantation and a particular physical action as well, right? Is that what your understanding of a charm is?
I know. I meant maybe make it more simple if you don't gonna go into
Well,
medicals to detail, but a lot of people use symbols on their tattoos, like sacred symbols, or they're
mm,
using it to get more power or more energy or protecting.
okay. Yep.
So there is a lot of use of. I mean, historically, it had like a real connection. Today, it's maybe more Instagrammy. What do I know? But I think some people consciously choosing certain symbols on their body. I was specifically interested in healing symbols, but never mind. Let's open it up to symbols
I'm
and
with
having
you.
your everyday
Well, I'll look
tattooing
at both.
symbols. So maybe
I'll
you
look at
can.
both. Yeah. I'll look at both and I'll break it down for people too. So it's like any symbol, whether you have conscious awareness or not, is invoking a particular metaphysical um, process. You just draw a spiral in one direction, and that's like an opening. You draw a spiral back over the top in the other, it's a closing. You know, you draw a line, there's a certain like energetic expression that's happening. You draw a circle, there's a different one. Okay, so there's like just at the simplest layer of forming a symbol or a marking, there is something happening metaphysical if you're aware of that layer. Okay, but then so there's a layer of like simply getting a tattoo that is to evoke a healing property. You know, you might be getting like a particular deity, for example. Let's say over in India, you might get like a particular Hindu um, character, yeah, to evoke something. So there's that happening where it's like tattooing happening in parallel to like a sort of faith healing. You know, in Thailand, it's massive. They do sakyant, so they're Buddhist monks that are trained to tattoo, and they're saying prayers and they're tattooing particular um,
Yes, I've
characters
seen it.
that are the prayers, right? And sakyant, so it's like a mantra is like when your sound has a particular incantation, like a prayer. Then a yantra is that same expression in a diagram. It's drawn. You know, so if you look at Sakyant, that's a really good example of it. But it's the same if you look back at like sort of like Viking and different sort of pagan markings. It's the same in current cultures. So all tattoos are evoking something, and people don't even think about it. So you can get a real modern symbol. The one I've sort of been running with in popular culture is something like people could be getting like a SpongeBob tattoo, and that's still evoking a beyond physical connection with something that's it's similar to like a consciousness that's being created in the collective because of their experience with this character that doesn't exist, but they're connecting themselves to it in a way. You know, and that might seem like a bit irrelevant, right? Because we're trying to go into these areas of like magical workings, medicinal workings, which I'll get to because I've got experience with the medicinal stuff. But on that simple level, I'm just showing that people's unconscious interaction with different symbols is having a effect, whether they're aware of it or not. It's so obvious when you start to see it. People will have tattoos of different characters, you know, like they might have like this is one I saw the other day, which was hilarious. They had like Homer Simpson wearing like an ACDC shirt with like a funny haircut and doing something tattooed on them. And you look and you're like, it's a caricature of themselves, you know? So there's and so which one comes first? Are they already looking like that before they get the tattoo? And they feel like drawn to it? Or are they getting these tattoos because they're being influenced by something and then they start to take on its character? You know, someone would need to like do some study and some observation to work those things out. But on like a
People and
medicinal
dogs.
people and dogs, right. Yeah, yeah. or like partners even. You look at this like this play, you know, and
Don't go there. Don't go there.
don't go there. Don't go there. Yeah. But on that, what it is, it's like there's the agent and the arena. This is how I heard it explained to me recently, or like there's the player in the game, okay? And so the game's influencing the player and the player's influencing the game, or the agent or arena, either way. It's not one's affecting the other mutually. So it's like you're having an effect on the tattoo and what it does, and the tattoo is having an effect on you and what it's doing to you. That's how it works. Um, so there's Otzi, right? Otzi is the mummy that was found in the Otzi Alps near where you are, and he's like 5,000
I know,
something years old, and he's
of course.
got all of those different um, markings that were presumably cuts. Okay, so this is like a medicinal layer where they were cutting the skin.
And you know
They were
why, right?
putting Yeah, yeah. So they cut they put plant matter in, and then they burn it. It's like a form of
Yes.
moxibustion, probably.
Yes.
Okay, so it's like there's lots of
And it
medicinal
and it most
layers to that.
likely had the healing. It was a healing
Correct.
ritual, most likely.
Yep.
To the
Yeah.
best of our knowledge, it was done for protection or healing charm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my first hand experience with something like that is having a teacher who was a holy man, or like people would say a shaman, I guess, because of the culture that he came from. And when he marked people, he would cut and rub charcoal in. So probably very similar to the sort of things you'd see on Otzi, but they were smaller. And all of the stuff he did was therapeutic, was medicinal, and medicine from that system is is highly supernatural. It has to do like you're praying, you're doing what you're doing is evoking the aid of the things beyond you in a physical process. You're asking for their relationship within that to aid what you're doing. And so he'd do that a lot. He'd be doing cuts and taking things out of people or putting things into people through the opening in their skin. So this is like your veil between the external and internal worlds, right? And so depending on how you view that relationship, this is a bit of a threshold point. And so the things that we're putting into
And welcome back. This is our second part, the exciting life of podcasters. We had some technical internet issues, but we are back and we're gonna a little bit recap some of the things we already said, and then jump like right to our ending. And so I would like to go back, forward, and which ways to the most important question of the podcast, so we get this right about how the lines on the bodies, how the symbols on the body can affect our energy system, and how you help and guide others understanding what their tattoos actually doing, what the symbols themselves are meaning, and the position, how they're disturbing, and how you're trying to fix it, how I understood it, correct the lines or
Mhm.
readjust the lines, or tell us about the magic that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So yeah, to recap and try and I guess like frame up the therapeutic lens for people with tattooing. Um, Basically, what we've already covered is that there's the natural and the supernatural, and where tattooing comes from. Uh, I guess the therapeutic lens is also caught up in almost like a spiritual lens. They see people are seeing the world through both of them, and so if we allow ourselves to look at tattooing in that way, uh, all tattoos are charms, and all tattoos are spells, and all tattoos are working on a person in all of these different arenas: the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual. Um, Obviously, people don't have to look at all of those layers. And, maybe if you're not looking, they're not having an influence. That's, conjecture. We don't actually know. Um, from my own observation of people I'm working with, that's kind of acute observation of what's happening to people when I work with them. That's how I've started connecting all of these dots. So if we go with the layer that all tattoos are charms, all of them are affecting you in some way, then yes, we can look at the specifics. I think maybe where you were pointing in the first half of this lecture, that there's certain symbols, there's different ways to use it, like quite intentionally and focused. If you're someone who's sort of, I guess, got a particular uh, training or body of information that you're working from in constructing particular symbols and charms that can be used in this like magical way. And I spoke about how even everyday tattoos, like with the example of SpongeBob, or let's say a football club or a certain character or writing that you get, is performing the same underlying function as one of those spells. It's just more unconscious. And in terms of like where things land on the body, again, there's these different layers. So Western medicine will look at things like our circulatory system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, the nervous system, the lymphatic system. You get into Eastern medicine, there's start looking at meridian systems and energetic centers of the body. And if we look at these things, they're these systems that influence our health, also our alignment. So, like the harmony within our body, how things line up and flow and read together, and how they feel and what they're influencing. And so, I see tattooing just as another system in the body, except it's one that we're creating consciously by putting tattoos into the skin in these different areas. So the biggest thing when I'm working with someone is like looking at I guess, the alignment of the tattoos. There's the physical side of it, just where they sit, whether things are balanced or not, and whether someone has any awareness of that. And then also the alignment in the story. So whether what they're saying actually fits, whether the tattoos are appropriate to who they are and where they are. Because a lot of time there's a big misalignment there, just in the narrative that they're telling themselves. Um, and so you can kind of see that as a bit of a charm as well. You think of charms and spells as being like we were saying. There's like this incantation. There's this verbal aspect, and then there's an action. You're carrying this physical representation, and you have a story that you tell yourself about it, or you tell the world, or it tells to the world. And like a picture tells 1,000 words. That's an old saying. Yeah, one picture can convey 1,000 words. Then a symbol, we could go further, and we could say like a symbol actually conveys more information than 1,000 pictures, because it's this acute distillation of lots of different ideas. And then we could go even further and say a tattoo conveys even more than a symbol does, because it's a symbol in a particular context to a person's experience, to their identity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense on
Okay.
many different levels. Because
Yeah.
I just told you I had a lot of podcast conversations over the last couple of days, and it's become very interesting to me because talking to so many different people from the spiritual world, it's a mind blowing experience, and one has to understand that there are so many levels of consciousness and so many levels of experience. They're neither higher or lower. That's not the point. That's a waste of time. But as you said so beautifully, some of the symbols maybe have SpongeBob. Some symbols maybe have a very personal message and meaning. If someone died or remembrance or whatever, that gives them power, gives them strengths on a subconscious level. And then there are those magic symbols who've been used for hundreds, thousands of years, and clearly either through geometry contain energy and therefore uh, bring energy or different wavelengths, manifest them. There's a lot of work being done on those kind of symbols, and then there's really then the super crazy uh, when you call on gods or demons, or when we don't really go into the angels and things like that. And I've come to understand as a young podcaster, wow, there's a lot of people out there working with spirituality. There's a lot of there's so
Lovely.
many people out there, and I really understand your work from the perspective that you're very calm, looking at a person, very neutral, looking at a person. You're looking alignment, you're looking message, you're looking the meridians, the energy fields. You're looking all of this, and you just does it make sense? Is it good for the person? Or
Right.
is it not good for the person? So, I mean, so in that case, you're kind of like a twin brother because I, as a podcaster, I have no opinion. I listen, I ask, I humbly want to understand what people say. And in that sense, you're some kind of twin brother. You just look at the person and see, does it fit? Right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Does it fit? Does it make sense? I mean, and even going into like, is it good? Is it bad? It's one of those gray areas of like, who are we to say what's good or bad for someone? Like when we zoom out, right? Um, a teacher, and he'd always say,
Very
all
hard
is
to
as it
say.
should be. It's like,
Very
okay, yeah. But then you still need to act in the moment in an interaction and be able to make judgment in a way that's sound. So, like, again, lots of people have aversion to judgment. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. Is it good? Is it bad? And it's like, yeah, it's hard to say, but judging an action on whether it's something that sort of contributes to someone's life or deteriorates it, let's say, or whether it's true in terms of they're talking about something that they actually are or has actually happened to them, or whether it's fantasy, like self idealization. You can start to move people into a place where they're identifying with something that's very ungrounding for them, um, and that's so they're kind of like the guideposts for me, and I try to make it less of an intellectual thing. I use the intellect, but I'm also trying to use the intuition, trying to use the instinct, like you said, trying to be very stable and neutral in the interactions, coming from a place of like I don't necessarily know, but I'm going to engage with someone with as much clarity and presence as I can to try and help guide them in their tattoo process towards something that is harmonious with who they are and their being and who they're becoming. You know, yeah,
I I I really see this as like a big theme for me next year to exactly what you said right now. I think if all I can contribute or all you can contribute is bring just a little bit more awareness. Look what you have in your case, what you've put on your body, what you meant at the moment, what is still stands for you now. All just asking these questions, starting to talk about with the person is a cleansing, is a therapeutical, is a growing moment. We have to just get a little bit more aware. We just have to open our eyes, and as you said, in a grounded way. You said it all so importantly that I also have seen over the last couple of weeks so intensively that some just up there in the clouds and some are moving too fast, some are moving here. And calmly, as you said, looking a person, trying to sense it, using some knowledge, but using sensing, feeling, and then starting to bring awareness. This is exactly what the healing I would call.
yeah, paying attention,
But
just paying attention to what's happening.
but very important, you now told me this second before we here started the recording. That's the next thing I'm very interested in is once you started all of this, it has to lead somewhere and community sharing, trying to create a platform where one can express what one has learned or fought or safe places for sharing and communicating. That's then once you started asking the questions, you need to talk with someone about it. You need to share them. I I know there's a lot of critics, and I'm saying it anyway, and I will continue saying it. I don't care for the critics. You just should not do spiritual work too long alone at home, staring on the wall. At some point, you need to share with others and accept what they will tell you. this sitting at home alone, reading book after book, it is toxic. Now I use the word.
Yeah, it can be unhealthy for sure. Can be unhealthy. We're social beings, you know. Um, I think it's more that there's kind of like a construct that we're in at the moment that exacerbates this narrative that we talked about in the start, where the supernatural doesn't exist. So a lot of people that start to lean into exploring different ways to the mainstream, there's almost like a firewall in place where it's like if they want to connect with the mainstream society, they're going to be made to feel stupid or awkward. Like, oh, you believe in spirits or you believe in a creator, you know, you must be unintelligent because we've moved into such a heady place of functioning. You know, it makes sense. We're just intoxicated with artificial intelligence at the moment, which is something that actually is lacking the other center of thought, which is the heart, right? So people that are like trying to stay in this more balanced place are finding it harder to have interactions in the world in sort of societal communal context because the narrative is kind of juxtaposed to what they're exploring. So they ended up isolating themselves or becoming hermits, right? Um, so yeah, where it's led me with tattooing lots of people that are in this process of deep introspection and sort of expanding their awareness and trying to understand what's influencing them, you know, their external world, their internal world, and doing it through tattoos, uh, is that there is this community already for me of all of these people that I'm tattooing and having similar conversations with and having this narrative open up in front of me. I'm like, oh, all of these people are having real similar experiences. This person would get along really well with that person. Oh, this person's tattoos are a similar expression to this person's tattoos. And this is like in unconscious tattoos and conscious tattoos. So it's like I'm seeing the unconscious play out as a pattern on people's skin. And then I'm seeing the people that are becoming aware of that and the patterns that are sort of helping, yeah, harmonize and resolve all of those things that they were unaware of that were playing out. And so quite naturally, I start to see a group of people that can harmonize together. They can start to create like a supportive environment of one another where the narrative becomes cohesive. And so again, if we look at these sort of older cultures of tattooing, that's why tattooing was so highly regarded and worked so well in supporting people, um, allowing them to become better versions of themselves, allowing them to make sense of their world and their environment, allowing them to feel purpose and accomplishments, allowing them to feel safe, protected. All of these things is because they were all stitched together, not just by the tattoos, but by the story that they had and the sort of communal context that they had. And so moving into next year, after doing lots of renditions of like, okay, I want to share this information. I'll put a course together, I'll do a lecture, I'll do a presentation, I'll do a workshop. And saying that like a lot of people don't necessarily have a lot of time or desire to just move into education, just into learning, sort of dry book learning. I said, well, I can see more of a space for this communal engagement where it's like the ideas and the information that I'm working with people, like it's a base for how I'm working with people, uh, can still be there. But I want to just facilitate communal interactions and engagements that embed that story and allow people to understand their tattoos and their processes more. You know, so I've got a bit of a, I guess, like a textbook that I work from. That's the courses that I've been presenting. That's just available for people now. If you're in the community, the textbook's in the library. You can go through it at your own time, your own pace. But there's like a yearly calendar that we're setting up for next year, which is a cycle of different engagements in person and online every week, every month, different themes that relate to the community's story. um, and with a bunch of different tools. So the two tools that I've developed that are in the community that we help people work through, one of them is a mapping tool. And that tool is for people that already have tattoos, and it allows them to get an up to date timeline or a ledger of all their tattoos that they have and all the information that's contained within it really clearly. We like really squeeze out as much information as we can. So they have this almost this like autobiographical um, chunk of information to go through that are the things that have influenced them that they still carry with them. And so some of that might be quite burdensome, or it might be something that doesn't necessarily make sense with who they are anymore. There can be direct contradictions within these tattoos of who they are. You got
Oh,
something to say on
interesting.
that? It's fascinating.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very
It,
interesting. Because that's something I actually never thought about, is that you preserve, because I had now a couple of conversations with trauma specialists. And but now
yes.
what you're saying is that people having a tattoo a very specific moment in a very specific time. Today I'm having the tattoo, but my life goes on, my consciousness goes on. I grow, I marry, I get children, whatever. But on my body, I keep a mark of that 20 year ago me, young boy, experiencing this and that. So this crazy frozen of a very specific moment in time of a person, that's such a factor. I never thought about it.
Yeah, you just got that spot on, Philip. So I talk about this utility of tattooing as the record keeping capacity. And what happens is the ephemeral, so the thing that exists in the moment, gets recorded and becomes something that can be carried through time, right? So the ephemeral becomes transcendental. And that's the point. That's what it's meant to do. But again, the fact that we've moved so far away from our understanding and our relationship with it, we kind of do it backwards now. So tattoos were used as initiatory processes, which means getting tattooed should move you into a position of something that you haven't been introduced to yet, you don't know. Okay. So if a tattoo is used in that way, the tattoo should be a depiction or a marking that moves you towards a version of yourself in the future that you don't know yet, but you want to go there. You're acknowledging that you want to move towards this version of yourself. So in an old setting, a young boy or a young woman receiving a tattoo knows that that tattoo represents the older women. And so by getting it, she's stepping onto the path of becoming that version of herself, the older woman that's already held within the community. She has a model for that. And so that tattoo pins her to the future, and then it guides her towards it. In our current contemporary tattoo culture, this is why I'm doing the stuff I'm doing with people. We get it really backwards. It's wrong. Remember that magnetic shift. So we're doing it the opposite way. It's been flipped. Is people go like, okay, this tattoo is going to represent me, and this is who I am right now. This is who I think I am right now. So I'm going to get a tattoo, and it pins them to the past. So as they move forward, they're pinned to the past. So it actually stops them from moving into a future version of themselves. So they're using the contract in a way that binds them to something that they already know, opposed to binding them to something that they don't know and they want to become. And so who's tattooing you and the guidance you get becomes really important. You know, we're getting tattooed more regularly than any time in history, probably. We have more tattooists. You know, like we were saying, there used to not be a lot of tattooists. You couldn't just get what you wanted. And that's because of this layer of utility and with the knowledge, the responsibility. So, that saying, good intentions pave the way to hell. It's like there's a lot of seemingly aware or conscious tattooing now where people are intentionally going through ceremonies and rituals and tattooing people, and they don't necessarily realize a bunch of the different things that are playing out on this metaphysical layer. It's like very sort of logistical. You can see it clearly, but they don't have awareness of it. So I call it the bungee cord effect, that link. So it's like you can pin yourself to the future and it's going to pull you towards it, that bungee cord. There's a sort of tension. Or you're going to try and move away from something and it's going to keep pulling you back. Another way is like you're trying to be on the path, and an old tattoo can be keeping you off the path or constantly, like your steering wheel's out of alignment. It's hard to stay on the straight path because you have a tattoo that's pinning you to a point in time where you were out of balance or not in center. Um, Lots of layers to that. Energetic attachments to
Yes.
entities and all sorts of things. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes. Mark, everybody needs to listen to this conversation. Everyone. Absolutely.
Mm.
Because what you're saying is so crystal clear. If you get it a tool, make something positive, wish for the future, make something that brings you further, something that you will carry 30 years. So look at a message that has a 30-year value instead pinpointing a past negative whatever that just always drags you back. I mean, what you say is so crystal clear, and everybody, I think, needs to hear this message. And I hope that in the tattooing community, that you will really get traction, that you will have the strength to keep podcasting, keep talking, keep making lectures, that as many tattoo
Brilliant.
artists as possible can hear this, because that is a key thought. And everybody would wish you that anybody would have a positive future, somewhere to look forward to, somewhere to go. Who wants to be stuck in the back? I mean, it is so crystal clear
Totally.
what you say, and I hope that everyone will hear it. I must wish you all the luck in the
Thanks.
world.
Yeah, appreciate that. But there's this layer though that's important, right? To get, because there's the tattoos you already have, and once you have awareness of that, like you're getting the awareness now, you're like, yeah, of course. It's like, well, how do you actually line yourself up with the optimal future? So that's another aspect and another tool that we have in the community, which is the Pathfinder. So I don't know if you've spoken to anyone yet around things like, do we actually make choices? Do we have choice? Do we have free will? Or is it all sort of predetermined by previous experiences? I go into that with people when they come in to get tattooed. Probably like your podcast. I have some crazy conversations while I'm tattooing. Um, and I sit there and I go like, the only choice we really have is to be aware in the moment. And so if we sit and think too much about the tattoo, we're probably going to pin ourselves to something that isn't necessarily that optimal unknown future of ourselves. So most tattoos, even with good
Yes.
intentions, are still creating a charge that is moving them even like
Yes.
1 degree away from that optimal thing. So there needs to be a relationship that allows you to hand over the direction to something beyond you. This is where it gets to the supernatural layer. And that means that both the person getting tattooed and the person giving the tattoo need to be in a cohesive and harmonious circuit as well. So there's a lot there, uh, which is why we're going into this community space to really sort of allow people to work through all of the material, because it's hard to do it alone. When I run the course, usually people get a third of the way in, and when it gets to that process of mapping their tattoos, it just drops off, because I think people kind of need some, not like hand holding, but just like working collaboration to allow them to get through that process, and then be able to move forward. And so within the tattoo pathway, it's like there's a bit of a structure for people. It's like, here's what tattooing is. Let's frame it up, undo the old program. Here's here's a framework for you to be able to move in your move in your tattoo process in a way that you know where you're going, you know where you've been, and it makes sense to you. And there's other people doing it, so you got community around you to sort of witness you and help you unpack things. That's kind of the essence of the community space, you know? And it's not for artists, it's for people that have got tattoos. So the tattoo industry is a little bit sort of solipsistic. Everything that it seems to offer other than tattoos is for artists, training artists, artists unions and all of this sort of stuff. There's nothing for the people getting tattooed. They're just on the end of it. Um, and tattooists just want to tattoo more people, really, because it's their income. I understand, um, but I'm trying to offer something for people that are getting tattooed so that they can make sense of what it is that they're actually participating in, potentially for a very long time. Or like you said in our last conversation, for the youth that are looking at approaching in and interacting with tattooing for the first time, to be more educated on it from all of these different levels. So that's the communities for people getting tattooed and wanting to make sense of their tattoos. And in terms of artists, if
So
there's artists, oh, you go.
no, I just needed to, for 1 second, clarify. You said that there is a tool so you can develop your tattoo. Is this like an online tool, some questionnaire, or is it conversation with the community? I did not really understand how you create this tattoo that's supposed to guide you into the future. Uh, can you, but maybe one sentence how this works technically?
Yeah, yeah. So it's called the Tattoo Pathfinder method. So it's like a questionnaire. It's a reflective exercise. It's like a journaling exercise that allows you to orient yourself. So where am I now in this moment with full case of the evidence with what I already have tattooed and what's happened behind me so that I can
Mhm.
make sense moving forward. It's basically like a exercise to allow you to take aim, yeah, take aim on what's the most meaningful, what's the most important thing for this tattoo to be moving you towards. So it takes people from this
I
superficial
understand.
layer of tattooing. This is what I want. This is what I think looks good. This is what someone else thinks. It strips all of that away and goes like, so if tattooing is going to bear weight on you from this moment forward, these are all the considerations around that tattoo. And just by considering them all, they're going to be in that marking and in that process. We're kind of like, uh, we're dialing up the volume of that point in time when you're getting tattooed to 100% accuracy, like to the best of our capacity. Um, so yeah, that's what that is. So it's the mapping tool and the Pathfinder tool create a toolkit for people within the community, and everyone in the community is using that toolkit and using mutual language so they can sort of work out what's going on for themselves and move forward. It's an interesting thing, the contemporary culture,
And
like the tattoo industry. It's very different to what used to
is
exist
this is this an Australian community or is it worldwide or how you set up?
worldwide. Worldwide. So I'm in Australia. The in-person stuff obviously is here. Anyone can come, but obviously it's like, the sort of network of people I have here. We're going to get together and camp for a weekend, go into some of the course material for the calendar for next year, probably do a sauna or a sweat to purify for the year. And then everyone's sort of working together in this space, staying connected online. And then through the year, people are going to get tattooed, and they're going to get tattooed in basically what I'm saying is like a bit of a nest, that sort of nurtures that experience and allows it to be optimized, I guess, in a way. Um, yeah, and what I was going to say is for artists, Philip, is that there there is a layer of material and sort of training that I want to do with other artists. Being fully aware that I'm in a process of working stuff out myself. My tattoos aren't balanced. I'm not, some perfect image, and I'm still having to pay attention with what I'm doing with people. That's like kind of like a lifetime thing. I haven't got a perfect way. I'm just sort of trying my best. And so I can share that with other artists. But the first step is that they look at their own tattoos. So that's why the community is based around the individual's experience with their tattoos and what that means for them and for the broader collective, you know. That's what the focus is. Turns the magnifying glass onto themselves. So even if you're a tattoo artist, you got to look at your own tattoos so you can understand and make more sense of what it is you're doing with other people. Your own tattoos are the biggest teacher and educational tool that you have. So once an artist is in the space and sort of working through their own tattoos, which is a huge ask for a tattoo artist. Tattoo artists these days, most of them have like at least double what anyone else collecting tattoos would have. And usually they're quicker to get a tattoo for a superficial reason because it's kind of their industry. So there's usually lots of material for tattoo artists to look at, which can make it quite difficult to fully digest and sort of accept, I guess, the point of view I'm offering here. But artists that do that, then with that sort of base level where we're like on the same page, I can start to share other things with them that are more relevant to actually giving tattoos to people. Um, so there's a handful of people that have done the course over the years that I'm going to do that
Right.
with. Yeah.
We're slowly coming towards the end of
Mhm.
this second half, so to say. I of course want to invite you if there's something else you would like to share that we forgot to address or something that you needs to be said, then please do so. But generally, I think that whoever first time get anything to do with tattoo, I think we managed in that podcast to make it see as a bigger thing, not just as something that's just superficial on somebody's as like a fashion thing. They understand that there are so many layers to tattoos. They understand that there's a huge human history connected with tattoos. And I think people having tattoos, I think a lot of them it will blow their mind what they have maybe or not done to their body, to their health, to their consciousness, subconsciousness, natural, supernatural, and then seeing also the traumatic experience of the journey that you did something and going back, going forward, is another layer that you offer. And on top of all of this, you're you're, you're trying to uh, map as a therapeutic tool to help navigate all of these elements. I guess they're coming together in your mapping, and you even go further and help people who are looking for tattoos or want to extend them or whatever to start to do it as a more spiritual tattoo, more as a
Mm.
initiation, more as a self prayer, whatever wording here comes to my mind. It's just something that makes you stronger, healthier, more conscious. To do if you do it right. Let's make it very simple. Um,
Yeah.
fine, why not?
Yeah. Good recap.
This is for
Good
me
recap.
the ending of this podcast. Very, very important conversation. And now please take your time to say goodbye, or if you want to share one couple more thoughts, it's all on you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So, and
Yeah.
let's keep this as a message for next year. Go together in the sauna, or go together, have a sweat. That's how the next year will start in a good way. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So
beautiful,
you.
beautiful. Thanks so much for having me, Philip. Yeah, I guess I'll just round it out, reiterating it similar to how you did. They're not just tattoos, they're more than tattoos. There's more layers to it. If you want to have a meaningful tattoo, if you're someone that's wanting that, you need to be living a meaningful life. They're kind of two maxims that are very simple. And yeah, if anyone's listening and sort of pennies are dropping around their own tattoos and you have questions, or you're starting to notice things with your tattoos that you want some guidance around. Lack of guidance is the biggest thing with the contemporary tattoo culture. Yeah, reach out. We're like very approachable, and you probably won't find anyone else that's as motivated as us to unpack your tattoos and help you out. So yeah, tattoopathway.com is
The
where to
links,
go.
all the links are here.
Yeah, yeah. And Philip, I really appreciate your drive and mission at the moment. You're a very busy man. You're getting flooded, like you were saying. You're not totally sure where it's going for yourself. So I just I I I hope all the best for your process with the podcast and however it unfolds. And I'm sure you'll trust that, and it will take it wherever it needs to go, because you're doing the exact thing that we were just talking about. You're paying close attention and listening. So that's going to guide it for sure. Thank you again, Philip. Appreciate it. Hope you have a good Christmas or good New Year.
Thank you so much. And let's hope we have a sweat together in some moment. So,
Oh, that'd be
thank you.
amazing. Okay, see you, mate.